before long, one fell dead to the ground, whilst the conqueror spread his wings and flew away. Almost immediately, two other larger birds who had been watching the duel flew up and alighted, one at the head and the other at the feet of the dead bird. They stood there some time sadly shaking their heads, and then dug up a grave with their claws in which they buried him. As soon as they had filled in the grave, the two flew off, and ere long returned, bringing with them the murderer, whom they held, one by a wing and the other by a leg, with their beaks, screaming and struggling with rage and terror. But they held tight, and having brought him to his victim's grave, they proceeded to kill him, after which they tore open his body, scattered the inside, and once more flew away. The prince, who had watched the whole scene with much interest, now drew near the spot where it happened, and glancing at the dead bird, he noticed something red lying near, which had evidently fallen out of its inside. He picked it up, and what was his surprise when he recognized the Princess Badoura's talisman, which had been the cause of many misfortunes. It would be impossible to describe his joy. He kissed the talisman repeatedly, wrapped it up, and carefully tied it round his arm. For the first time since his separation from the princess, he had a good night. And next morning he was up at daybreak and went cheerfully to ask what work he should do. The gardener told him to cut down an old fruit tree which had quite died away, and Camaralzaman took an axe and fell to vigorously. As he was hacking at one of the roots, the axe struck on something hard. On pushing away the earth, he discovered a large slab of bronze, under which was disclosed a staircase with 10 steps. He went down them and found himself in a roomy kind of cave, in which stood 50 large bronze jars, each with a cover on it. The prince uncovered one after another and found them all filled with gold dust. Delighted with his discovery, he left the cave, replaced the slab, and having finished cutting down the tree, waited for the gardener's return. The gardener had heard the night before that the ship about which he was inquiring would start ere long, but the exact date not being yet known, he had been told to return the next day for further information. He had gone, therefore, to inquire, and came back with good news beaming in his face. "My son," said he, "rejoice and hold yourself ready to start in 3 days' time. The ship is to set sail, and I have arranged all about your passage with the captain." "You could not bring me better news," replied Camaralzaman, "and in return I have something pleasant to tell you. Follow me and see the good fortune which has befallen you." He then led the gardener to the cave, and having shown him the treasure stored up there, said how happy it made him that heaven should in this way reward his kind host's many virtues and compensate him for the privations of many years. "What do you mean?" asked the gardener. "Do you imagine that I should appropriate this treasure? It is yours, and I have no right whatever to it. For the last 80 years I have dug up the ground here without discovering anything. It is clear that these riches are intended for you, and they are much more needed by a prince like yourself than by an old man like me, who am near my end and require nothing. This treasure comes just at the right time, when you are about to return to your own country, where you will make good use of it." But the prince would not hear of this suggestion, and finally, after much discussion, they agreed to divide the gold. When this was done, the gardener said, "My son, the great thing now is to arrange how you can best carry off this treasure as secretly as possible for fear of losing it. There are no olives in the Ebony Island, and those imported from here fetch a high price. As you know, I have a good stock of the olives which grew in this garden. Now you must take 50 jars, fill each half full of gold dust, and fill them up with the olives. We will then have them taken on board ship when you embark." The prince took this advice, and spent the rest of the day filling the 50 jars, and fearing lest the precious talisman might slip from his arm and be lost again. He took the precaution of putting it in one of the jars, on which he made a mark so as to be able to recognize it. When night came, the jars were all ready, and the prince and his host went to bed. whether in consequence of his great age or of the fatigues and excitement of the previous day. I do not know, but the gardener passed a very bad night. He was worse next day, and by the morning of the third day was dangerously ill. At daybreak, the ship's captain and some of his sailors knocked at the garden door and asked for the passenger who was to embark. "I am he," said Camaralzaman, who had opened the door. "The gardener who took my passage is ill and cannot see you, but please come in and take these jars of olives and my bag, and I will follow as soon as I have taken leave of him." The sailors did as he asked, and the captain, before leaving, charged Camaralzaman to lose no time, as the wind was fair, and he wished to set sail at once. As soon as they were gone, the prince returned to the cottage to bid farewell to his old friend, and to thank him once more for all his kindness. But the old man was at his last gasp, and had barely murmured his confession of faith when he expired. Camaralzaman was obliged to stay and pay him the last offices, so having dug a grave in the garden, he wrapped the kind old man up and buried him. He then locked the door, gave up the key to the owner of the garden, and hurried to the quay, only to hear that the ship had sailed long ago after waiting 3 hours for him. It may well be believed that the prince felt in despair at this fresh misfortune, which obliged him to spend another year in a strange and distasteful country. Moreover, he had once more lost the Princess Badoura's talisman, which he feared he might never see again. There was nothing left for him but to hire the garden, as the old man had done, and to live on in the cottage. As he could not well cultivate the garden by himself, he engaged a lad to help him, and to secure the rest of the treasure, he put the remaining gold dust into 50 more jars, filling them up with olives so as to have them ready for transport. Whilst the prince was settling down to this second year of toil and privation, the ship made a rapid voyage and arrived safely at the Ebony Island. As the palace of the new king, or rather of the Princess Badoura, overlooked the harbor, she saw the ship entering it and asked what vessel it was coming in, so gaily decked with flags, and was told that it was a ship from the island of the idolaters, which yearly brought rich merchandise. The princess, ever on the lookout for any chance of news of her beloved husband, went down to the harbor attended by some officers of the court, and arrived just as the captain was landing. She sent for him and asked many questions as to his country, voyage, what passengers he had, and what his vessel was laden with. The captain answered all her questions and said that his passengers consisted entirely of traders who brought rich stuffs from various countries, fine muslins, precious stones, musk, amber, spices, drugs, olives, and many other things. As soon as he mentioned olives, the princess, who was very partial to them, exclaimed, "I will take all you have on board. Have them unloaded, and we will make our bargain at once, and tell the other merchants to let me see all their best wares before showing them to other people." "Sire," replied the captain, "I have on board 50 very large pots of olives. They belong to a merchant who was left behind, as in spite of waiting for him, he delayed so long that I was obliged to set sail without him." "Never mind," said the princess. "Unload them all the same, and we will arrange the price." The captain accordingly sent his boat off to the ship, and it soon returned laden with the 50 pots of olives. The princess asked what they might be worth. "Sire," replied the captain, "the merchant is very poor. Your Majesty will not overpay him if you give him 1,000 pieces of silver." "In order to satisfy him, and as he is so poor," said the princess, "I will order 1,000 pieces of gold to be given you, which you will be sure to remit to him." So saying, she gave orders for the payment and returned to the palace, having the jars carried before her.